In 1991, Sennheiser crafted a headphone system thought by many to be the best-sounding headphone ever made, even to this day, 25 years later. It was called the Orpheus HE-90, HEV-90. HE-90 referred to the model number of the system's electrostatic headphone, and HEV-90 was the model number of the companion electrostatic tube amp. Of course, this system became known simply as the Orpheus, and I think many of you here on HeadFi are very familiar with it, even those of you who've not yet had a chance to hear it. 300 of these Orpheus systems were made, 300 were sold, and the price back then was around $13,000. Now, if you tried to buy one in excellent condition today, that original Orpheus system would likely set you back around $35,000, maybe even as much as $40,000 if you could find a particularly pristine, factory-refreshed original Orpheus. Now, by 1991, Sennheiser was already one of the most well-regarded companies in the world when it came to microphones and headphones, and the Orpheus represented an all-out effort from Sennheiser, always and still a strong engineering-minded company, using every resource at its disposal to make the best headphone in the world. And again, it was so good that many feel it's still the best in the world today. Now that I've had opportunities to hear fully factory-restored Orpheus HE-90, HEV-90 systems, I have to say that I agree. I agree that even after 25 years, the original Orpheus system was indeed the best ever. Yes, you heard me correctly, was the best ever. Through their unique and perhaps somewhat mysterious Reshaping Excellence campaign, Sennheiser for the last couple of months has been teasing an Orpheus successor, and today the cover's finally off as the official and full unveiling of what they've been calling their monument to sound is happening right now. Today, Sennheiser is introducing the new Sennheiser Orpheus HE-1060 HEV-1060 system. It was designed and engineered by Sennheiser for almost a decade to be the new best headphone in the world, and it is by a significant margin the best headphone I have ever heard. In other words, after 25 years, to top the Orpheus, it ended up having to be Sennheiser versus itself, Orpheus versus Orpheus. For a while now, I've known it was coming. Years ago, they shared their plans with me to craft an Orpheus successor. A couple of years ago, Sennheiser's Katrin Huss showed me what it looked like and planted the idea of having me visit Sennheiser's headquarters to finally hear it. Not surprisingly, once planted, I wouldn't let that idea go. So a couple of years ago, at my expense, I flew to Sennheiser's headquarters to hear an earlier version of it, this system then being referred to internally only by a code name. Among many other Sennheiser notables, I was greeted by Axel Grell, whom many of you know is the man behind Sennheiser's legendary HD800, and also Manfred Hibbing, a man who was one of the key engineers behind the original Orpheus's development, as well as one of Sennheiser's microphone technology innovators, and who essentially came out of retirement to help Sennheiser develop the Orpheus successor. I have to say that having my first in-depth technical discussions of the Orpheus successor with Axel Grell and Mr. Hibbing was easily one of the highlights of the trip. In the interest of time, as well as issues of confidentiality, I won't go into detail about all that we talked about, but it covered transducer design, circuit design, audio measurements, some history and background, and so much more. I also met with Katrin Huss again, and with Maurice Poiret, who's director of Sennheiser's Select and Audiophile business segments, and also with Andreas Sennheiser, an engineer himself who co-leads the company with his brother Daniel Sennheiser, and they made clear to me just how serious, just how committed, and how without limits they were treating the Orpheus successor. This was about doing everything the best they could to create an Orpheus successor independent of reasonable limits that govern the development of pretty much any other kind of product by any other kind of company. Even in terms of cost and price, there were no set limits. I met with many other Sennheiser team members too, including many of the engineers who were working on the project, and the pride and excitement they had for the new Orpheus was unbelievable. The new Orpheus was very much a serious mission internally, and it showed. I took an extensive tour of the facilities at Sennheiser's headquarters, and I took a lot of photos, pretty much none of which I've been cleared to show you, and understandably so. I've visited many headquarters over the years, and Sennheiser's may be the most impressively equipped. As I said to Axel, Sennheiser must be a very fulfilling place to work as an engineer, which he smiled and agreed with. Finally, after the tour, I ended up in a listening room only a few people at Sennheiser had access to, and that almost no outsiders will ever see. And in there, I had a chance to listen to this top-secret Orpheus successor alongside the original Orpheus system and a Stax SR009 system. Of the many times I'd heard the original Orpheus, this time was clearly the best I'd heard it. I suspect that perhaps it's because this one belonged to Sennheiser and this system was kept in tip-top condition by them inside and out. Compared to the outstanding SR009, the original Orpheus was less clinical but no less revealing to me, and as such was the more musical and enjoyable of the two. Either way, both systems were amazing. I own several Stax headphones now, including the SR009, so I'm definitely a Stax fan. But that Orpheus, it was the better of the two for me, and clearly so. Then I switched to the Orpheus Successor, and it was easily the best of the three, and I'll say more about its sound later. I was in awe. Mr. Hibbing smiled, but didn't seem surprised by my response. He even took some time to listen to it again himself. Axel was a bit more expressive, more exuberant, and wanted to talk about my impressions. Over my 2 days at Sennheiser, I went back up to that room as much as I could, and they gave me many hours to do that. Amazingly, it would only get better from there.
Okay, so now I'm in Paris, which I'll explain in just a second. But I first want to apologize for the camera quality and also for the setting. You're in my hotel room. It's the only place I have in Paris to shoot, so we're going to go with it. But I'm here to follow the Sennheiser HE-1060, HEV-1060 Orpheus Successor. I had a chance, well, it's here for an event. There's an event tomorrow. I guess by the time you watch this, it'll be today. And it's really the first time that Sennheiser is going to allow people to listen to the system, and they're going to be doing this at stops all around the world. And it's starting here in France, and that's why I'm here. And so I also had a chance today to have the system in this hotel room with me for the better part of a day, which I'm going to get to in just about a minute. What a wonderful thing to be able to do today. So before we get into any more detail about the system, I wanted to talk about something very obvious about it, and that's its styling. When you first encounter the Orpheus Successor, I mean, you notice that it looks like nothing else you've ever seen before. At least to me, I can't think of anything else I've ever seen that looks quite like it. Very unique. And the Orpheus 25 years before it was also very unique looking. But they go about being unique in completely different ways. The original Orpheus was a very striking, attention-grabbing design, very dramatic. In its resting state, which I'll explain that statement in a second, in its resting state, the new system is very sculptural. In fact, it uses Carrara marble, which Sennheiser points out it's the same marble that Michelangelo used in his sculptures. So it has a very sculptural appearance, like a modern sculpture on your tabletop or desk in its resting state. And I'm going to explain that because when you turn it on, it transforms. It literally moves and transforms. When you turn it on, either by pressing the power button on the front or using the remote control, the control dials actually come from being flush within the marble chassis. They actually emerge from the chassis toward you to greet you. And then only after that happens, the tubes rise out of the marble chassis. And then when that's done, the headphone is presented to you, a lid opens up, and then the headphones are presented to the user. It's a very dramatic presentation, and then it's even dramatic when you turn it off because it does all that in reverse. It hides the headphones away, the tubes recess, and then the control dials go back to be flush with the chassis, and it goes back to being that subtle, sculpture on your desk. It's very, very cool. So another thing you'll probably notice about this system is the HE-1060, the headphone, has what look like very large gold drivers. And what you're actually looking at there are gold vaporized ceramic electrodes, or stators. And then, of course, between those is the diaphragm. And in the case of this system, it's a platinum vaporized diaphragm. So that's what you're looking at. Now, they chose ceramic for its resonant or its anti-resonant properties, and so the gold is also chosen for performance characteristics. I don't believe there was any aesthetic reason chosen for the gold, but you will notice them, and it is a pretty dramatic looking feature of the headphones. As with the first Orpheus, I think that the design of the new Orpheus Successor will be polarizing. I think those who like vintage audio gear, very traditional-minded audiophiles, might find it a bit too modern looking, but I think a lot of people are going to really appreciate that modern sculpture appearance of the HE-1060, HEV-1060 system. I like the subtlety of it as well. Oliver Berger, the head of global design management at Sennheiser, at their design offices in Zurich, said about the Orpheus Successor that due to its technical superiority, it has no need for an exaggerated design, that its beauty lies in its reduction to what's essential. And I like that philosophy, and it really translates well, in my opinion, with the new Orpheus Successor.
The design of the new Orpheus isn't intended only to be striking in appearance, which it most certainly is, but also in large part governed by function. Again, the almost ceremonial turn-on sequence and movement allows the system to reach operational temperature. Also, the tubes within glass cylinders might appear to be a purely stylistic choice, but those quartz bulbs around the vacuum tubes are designed to reduce or eliminate airborne noise, as vacuum tubes can be microphonic. That's a fact known by any serious tube audio enthusiast. The main chassis housing, carved from a single block of Carrara marble, was chosen for its beauty but also possessing solidity that helps prevent structure-borne noise. That marble chassis is also spring-loaded and damped. The control dials that greet you when it's powered on and virtually disappeared when it's powered down are each painstakingly milled from a single piece of brass before being plated with chrome and have a nice heft to them. These dials are connected to motorized switches and potentiometers that directly control high-grade relays in the signal path to keep it as short as possible. The calibratable volume potentiometer controls the volume via two balance-driven Muses volume control chips. Now let's get back to those vacuum tubes. The new Orpheus's amplifier design is a very unique arrangement. You're only looking at a part of the amplifier when you see the tubes in the marble chassis. The final amplification stage is actually accomplished with something Sennheiser is calling cool Class A MOSFET high-voltage amplifiers that are integrated directly into the ear cups. Yes, those fins on the back of each of the ear cups might look like stylish, somewhat Art Deco-inspired adornments, but they're actually heat sinks for the integrated amps inside. No, don't worry, the headphones do not run hot, which is perhaps why Sennheiser is calling them cool Class A. There are some key advantages to a design like this, including the removal of the cable's capacitance and thus much higher efficiency. According to Axel Grell, the approach was to amplify the alternating voltage to high voltages not at the beginning of the cable, but at the point where it's really required, directly at the electrodes in the headphones. The distance between the amplifier and the diaphragm is less than 1 centimeter in the new Orpheus. Sennheiser says, with local and no overall feedback loops, the new Orpheus's amplifier system also delivers ultra-high impulse fidelity too. While some headphone designs have resorted to submicron diaphragm thickness, according to Axel Grell, Sennheiser's extensive research for the new Orpheus HE-1060 electrostatic headphones showed that with regard to the ratio of the diaphragm thickness to the coupled air mass, 2.4 micrometers was found to be optimal for allowing controlled vibration of the diaphragm. Axel said that in this case, it's not a matter of the thinner the better, but of finding the absolute optimum. Sennheiser rates the new Orpheus's frequency response at an amazing 8 Hz to more than 100 kHz, though I'm not sure what the plus-minus deviation is on that. THD, or total harmonic distortion, at 1 kHz at 100 decibels SPL, or sound pressure level, is rated at a very low 0.01%, which Sennheiser claims is the lowest distortion rating that has ever been measured in sound reproduction equipment of this type. Now, of course, all of this was designed ultimately to result in one primary thing: the ultimate sound, to be the new best headphone system in the world. The early version of the new Orpheus I heard nearly 2 years ago was the best headphone I'd ever heard by a substantial margin, even directly compared to the amazing original Orpheus next to it, and I mean unequivocally, bar none better. It was so amazing that I've actually followed this headphone to several places in the world like a stalker at my own expense, just for any chance to hear it again. And in London, I finally heard the production version of the new Orpheus for the very first time, and I was absolutely floored. Honestly, I got emotional. And to save myself from embarrassment in front of the people there, I was actually fighting back tears. There were people there, so I didn't want to cry. You have to understand, for nearly 15 years, Head-Fi has become a huge part of my life, every day, pretty much all the time. And this was, you know, it's like so many of us are pursuing the perfect sound from headphones, and I felt like perhaps this was as close to perfect from headphones as I would ever get. And if it's going to take 25 more years to top what I heard, I'm going to be like retirement age. So yeah, this was a very special moment. I literally had shivers. I mean, shivers. My skin was tingling. I mean, if I had hairs on the back of my neck, they'd be standing up. I'm not a very hairy guy though, but if I did, they'd be standing up. Yeah, it was remarkable. Goosebumps, I'm sure I had. I don't know how resolving your camera is, but if you saw my hands, they probably had goosebumps on them. Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic.
So now I've had the better part of a day to spend with the HE-1060, HEV-1060 system and listen to it some more. And what do I think? Fantastic, spectacular. I'm so glad I came, and I'm so glad I had the opportunity to have it here in my hotel room for a while. Now, I want to mention something I haven't mentioned previously. The HEV-1060 actually has its own DAC built into it, and I believe it's a Sabre-based DAC. I believe it's 32-bit, 384 kilohertz capable, and DSD 2.8 and 5.6 capable, I believe. So it has the ability directly built in to support high-res PCM and DSD decoding. So you might be asking, what did you think of the DAC? And I will say I didn't listen to it today because I wanted, with the limited time I had with it today, to listen to a source I was familiar with. So in my backpack I brought to France with me A Chord Electronics Hugo TT. It is probably my favorite DAC amp combo of all time, and it's also just a wonderful DAC on its own as a source component. And so I brought that with me because I'm very, very familiar with it, and I wanted to hear really more the headphone and the amp. And I'll get to the DAC because when the system is going to be stopping by HeadFi's offices relatively soon. I'd spoken with Axel Grell about that. And so I'll have more of a chance to listen to it then, including its DAC. But this time I just wanted to, again, use a source I was familiar with and just kind of listen more to the amp and headphones. And so now let's talk about that. What did I think? Wow. I mean, spectacular. Remarkable. It is everything I thought it was before and only confirmed with more listening. I can't wait to see tomorrow at the event the response of others as they get a chance to hear it for the first time. I want to quote Daniel Sennheiser, who said of the new system, "It is able to deceive our senses in a completely unique way, creating the perfect illusion of being directly immersed in the sound." And I have to say that I think for just about any other system, that would probably be hyperbole. But for this one, no, not. So what do I think of the sound? How does it sound? Say, for example, relative to if you've heard the previous Orpheus, the original Orpheus. I'd say it's probably a little less euphonic from sonic memory because I didn't have the original Orpheus here with me today, unfortunately. That would have been just sonic overload. But probably a little less euphonic, certainly more detailed, but not like that ruthless kind of detail. Not that cold, sterile kind of detail, just more like real life kind of detail. And, you know, when you hear a great system or a live performance, say, for example, which I don't mean to suggest that this is an out-of-head live performance type sound. It's still a headphone. But in terms of the reality of the sound and the tone and timbre, when you hear reality, you don't really break it out into bass, mid, treble. It is what it is. And that's what this system's like. But if you have to know, the bass response is fantastic. The impact is fantastic and fast and detailed. The mids are just gorgeous and honestly perfect. And the treble is very extended, very detailed. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the frequency response is way beyond any human's ability to hear in either direction. You know, I don't know how much that contributes to any of this, but it's just the closest thing to perfect I've heard in a headphone system. So that's how I feel about it. And I'm going to, again, try to listen to it some more tomorrow. So how excited am I about it? Very. Am I going to follow it some more still? Yeah, it's going to be making some stops elsewhere in the world. I think it's going to London, maybe Germany. US, which is where I'm going to go hear it again. So, yeah, I'm really, really excited about this, and I can't wait to see some of the responses tomorrow. So that's an introduction to what's being essentially revealed today for listening for the first time. The new, the successor to the Orpheus, the Sennheiser HE-1060 and HEV-1060. It's just a dream system, and if you're wondering why, again, it's such a big deal to me, it's because really this is a once in every 25 years thing, really. And again, in 25 years, I'm gonna be an old man in 25 years. I'm gonna be like retiring in 25 years, if not already retired. So that's why it's a big deal to me. Anyways, that's the Sennheiser HE-1060 and HEV-1060 introduction. It's going live today for other people to hear. You better get your ears on it the moment you can. See you next time.